So now looking at positive externalities, we need to know what is meant by positive externalities, so we need to be able to define them, and we need to explain how they arise as a result of the divergence between private and social benefits, and we need to know how they lead to market failure. So market failure, remember, being where the market system fails to achieve economic efficiency, usually in this case what we're studying because of allocative inefficiency, but it could be another type of inefficiency as well. So just a quick recap, externalities is an effect whereby a third party is affected by the actions of others, and a third party is anybody who's not directly involved in making the decision. So they're not the buyer, they're not the seller. So we're not looking at when we were looking at negative externalities, we were looking at costs. But now we're looking at positive externalities. We're looking at positive externalities in consumption. So we're looking at the benefits. So the private benefits are the benefits accruing to those taking a particular action. So, if I decide that I want to eat a Mars bar, the benefit to me would be that chocolatey full feeling that you'd get from it. Okay, it's a private benefit. And an external benefit, though, is a benefit to a third party. Okay, so I don't know, my husband might get a benefit because he sees that I'm very, very happy, so that might be an external benefit for him, but, I don't personally feel, his benefit. And then the social benefit is just the total benefits of the particular action, so the private benefits plus the external benefits, also sometimes called the true benefits of an action, but usually in your exam, social benefits. Okay, here's just a diagram like the cost diagram, but for benefits or private benefits, and then the external benefits. So this is the private benefits happen to the producer and the consumer. Out here, we've got third parties getting these benefits, and add them together, and you get the social benefit. Okay, so a positive externality then is where the social benefit of an activity is greater than the private benefit. And this can only occur if there's an external benefit that's accruing or occurring, happening to a third party. Okay, here's your diagram. So I said that it was a positive externality in consumption, which is why we've got two demand curves. When we were looking at negative externalities, we had two supply curves. But here we have positive externality in consumption. So we have our marginal private benefit. This is what we take into account when we're thinking, should we make this decision? Should we not? Should I eat the Mars bar? Should I not? I'm just thinking of the benefits to myself, the costs and the benefits to myself. Here we have the social costs equal, or marginal social costs equal the marginal private cost. Just to illustrate, there's no external cost here. It's not a negative externality diagram, just to keep things simple. So I just take into account my private costs, my private benefits, and this is the quantity I consume for this price. But if I took into account the external benefits that are occurring from this action, I would have a much higher demand, and if I was really taking into account these external benefits, I'd be more willing to pay a much higher price as well. So we've got this divergence between your private benefits and the social benefits, and we can see that's because there's an external benefit, and that's the external benefit there of the consumption at this level. Okay, so the consumer doesn't take into account the full benefit, so they consume at D1. If they took the full benefit into account, they'd consume at D2. Therefore, the price is lower than it should be. The quantity supplied and demanded is also lower than it should be. Because of this, there's underconsumption, there's underproduction, and too few scarce resources are being allocated to production. So this makes it allocatively inefficient. This is why it's market failure. We should be here in the socially optimal economy where we can feel other people's benefits, but we're not. We're here. Okay, so positive externalities, social benefits are greater than the private benefits. And the reason is because there's an external benefit. It leads to market failure because it leads to underconsumption, underproduction, which is allocatively inefficient. Okay, so what could we do to try and solve these problems? Okay, so just a brief overview because you'll get a presentation on each one of these things. But we have subsidies. Now this reduces the cost of production and can increase the supply, so that's how it solves it. We could have regulation. So you could make it against the law not to do a certain thing or provide a certain thing. So We'll look at that in more detail in the regulation presentation, because there's so much regulation, different types of regulation that does different things to diagrams. You could have a fine for not doing something as well. I suppose that's a type of regulation. Or you could just kind of inform people of the benefits if you wanted to. Now, it depends whether they care or not. Do I care? The benefits to other people. Depends how altruistic you are, I suppose. But those are some of the overviews. I think we're going to have a look at subsidies. So subsidies is just basically the opposite of an indirect tax. So it's a payment, usually from the government, to encourage production or consumption. But you probably your parents subsidise you quite heavily. Do you get pocket money for doing certain chores or doing certain things? I mean, that's a subsidy. So it doesn't necessarily have to be from the government. But when we're looking at our exams, we're thinking about it from the government. So what does a subsidy do? Well, a subsidy actually lowers costs of production. So therefore, a firm can increase the amount that they produce, so they can move from S1 to S2. This would cause excess supply, which puts downwards pressure on the price, and this causes a movement along your demand curve, so the quantity demanded increases. So there we can see we add a subsidy and supply shifts outwards. Okay, so this is a very complicated diagram, but this is just showing your subsidy and your positive externality together. So these blue lines, these two demand lines here, there's your positive externality. So here is not taking into account the external benefits, and here's taking into account those external benefits, so it's your social benefit. And so we're actually here, but we should be here. And so what we do is we place a subsidy, so it lowers the cost of production, so it moves supply outwards. So we've got this red line here, and so where we move to is here. Okay, so we get the quantity we wanted. Price is at P3, not P2, because the person making the decision, the first party and the second party, can't actually physically feel the external benefits, so they're not willing to pay up here for it. But if you apply a subsidy and you lower the cost of production, they're willing to pay this price and consume this quantity, which is really we're looking at the quantity here, the equilibrium quantity. Unlike negative externalities and indirect taxes, it's not the same diagram for this, so you must be aware of that and practice your subsidy diagram. Okay, so I think we've looked at both of those two specification objectives. This specification objective is dealt with in more detail. This was just a brief overview, but there's more detail on the individual presentations for those sections.